Chalice 6-1, sunrise.
Remove EPU safety pin. Bir daha çalıştıracağız çünkü henüz Link 16 required olmamıştı. O yüzden bir daha load edeceğiz bu datı. DT'yi. Ready to check alalım. To safe fuel.
True. Fuel safe. 12-1.
Hostile launch activity detected. Bullseye 119174. Dragnet 1-1, sunrise.
QNH alalım.
Visibility 10 kilometers or more. Sky conditions, no significant clouds. Temperature, +07 degrees Celsius. Altimeter, 2998 inches. Aviano, Information Hotel. Runway 05.
05.
Cobra 6-1, request taxi back. Cobra 6-1, taxi to the ramp. Welcome back.
Remove wheel checks. Request taxi for departure.
Good morning, Banshee 6. You are number 1 for departure. Hold present position.
Holding present position, Banshee 6-1.
Jackal 6, 2 ship, F-16s. Request taxi.
Good morning, Jackal 6. You are number 2 for departure. Hold present position. Give way to Banshee 6 to F-16 taxiing Sierra.
Vermedin ki bize izin, biz gidelim. Biraz garip oldu şu an. Zaman da geliyor. Bir daha isteyelim. Ben size esas kullanırız daha. Request taxi for departure.
Banshee 6, taxi Sierra Alpha. And hold short, runway 05.
Sierra Alpha, hold short, runway 05, Banshee 6-1.
Banshee 6-1, contact tower for takeoff. Switch to 8465.
Plasma 4-2, on final. Plasma 4-2, 80 auto tower. Continue inbound for runway 05. Plasma 4-1, 80 auto tower. Wing 010 at 16 knots. Runway 05, clear for landing. Jet gear down. Cyborg 1-2, on final. Cyborg 1-2, 80 auto tower. Continue inbound for runway 05. Banshee 6, hold short landing aircraft. Plasma 4-2, 80 auto tower. Wing 010 at 16 knots. Runway 05, clear for landing. Jet gear down.
Şunu da değiştireyim bari.
Cyborg 128 Auto Tower. Wing 010 at 16 knots. Runway 05. Clear for landing. Jet gear down.
Oğlum
Plasma
kaç tane?
41. Contact ground. Switch to 37665. Banshee 6. Is there a problem?
Ben şu... Oğlum bak.
Plasma 42. Contact ground. Switch to 37665. Banshee 61. What is your problem? You are disrupting traffic.
Request tax. Ready for departure. Ready for departure.
Banshee 6. 80 Auto Tower. Position and hold. Runway 05. Cyborg 12. Contact ground. Switch to 37665. Banshee 6. 80 Auto Tower. Wing 010 at 16 knots. Runway 05. You're cleared for takeoff.
Daha edemedim ki. Allah Allah, çok enteresan işler dönüyor ya. İki numara bir saçmaladı ya. Gidiyorum abi.
Two, airborne.
Report airborne.
Banshee 6, Aguiano. Departure. Depart heading 100. Resume on navigation.
AVAX checking.
Banshee 6-2, on my way.
2 close up. 2 close up.
2. 2, don't you think we're close enough?
advised, hostile launch activity detected. Bullseye 075105.
To save weapon state.
Banshee 62. 2 Magnum. 4 radar. Fuel state 11-2. Two in position.
2, switch side. 2, switch side. 2, switch side. 2, switch side.
Two.
Say failed state.
Two. Fuel safe. 10, 3.
Shell Point'e geliyoruz. Bir takım ayarlamalar. 2 fencing.
Two, fence in.
Spade 3-1. Package marshaled. Vandal 5, Dragnet 1, be advised, threat aircraft, bullseye 20532 23,000, print MiG-29s. Dragnet 1, Vandal 5, copy.
Bu biraz insafsızca olacak ama. Like sending 35s, F-35s to clear MiG-29s is just cruel.
Spade 3-1. Package departing the push point.
Bench is 6-1, package marshaled.
Spade 3, Dragnet 1, heads up. New. Bandit, bullseye 08013 21,000, print MiG-21s. Dragnet 1, Spade 3, copy. Basil 5-1, package marshaled.
Oraya rahat.
Basil 5-1, package leaving push point. Spade 3, Dragnet 1, be advised, threat aircraft, bullseye 07557 Brent, MiG-29s. Dragnet 1, Spade 3, copy.
Two, ground weapons free. 2, ground weapons free.
Two, we'll go. Magnum.
Çok erken attı ama ben sana diyeyim onu. PGM yani o herhalde aynı PGM alıyoruzdur.
Vandal 5, Dragnet 1, heads up. New, Bandit, Bullseye 19536 14,000. Print MiG-29s. Dragnet 1, Vandal 5, copy. Advised, hostile launch activity detected. Bullseye 20779.
Güzel.
Vandal 5, in. Hostile launch activity detected. Bullseye 116161. Be advised, hostile launch activity detected. Bullseye 20046.
Kalabalık. Herkes dönüyor. Kapatıyorlar yani. Bir şekilde. Hemen kapatıyorlar yani. Baksana. Rejoin.
AMC 62 on my way.
İşte niye yerde geziyor abi?
Spade 3-1, RTB. Vandal 5-1, let's go home.
Spanish is 6, going home. Two fence out.
Two.
Two say fuel state. Bu çok olmaya başladı ya.
quid pro freeze, and 8 senators who are either stepping down or are not up for re-election went over to the Republican side. And that's really troubling because Schumer was trying to hold the Democratic Party together. They had a very clear message, which is we're not going to vote for this unless Trump gives us a concession, and that concession has got to be on healthcare. He's got to show some flexibility in healthcare. He didn't give it, and it was, from Trump's point of view, I'm afraid, the Democrats that blinked first. That's the way the New York Times is presenting it. It's huge recriminations within the Democratic Party. So it's a strange week, a week where there are 3 different messages. Message of an ex-CIA governor, an ex-CIA officer taking Virginia back to the Democrats as a governor. A populist who's slightly scaring the business community and needs to do a lot of work to reassure them. Winning in New York was Zohran Mamdani. And then this splitting apart of the old governing senators in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, but it just underlines that, one, that America is this vast and very varied country. It's hard to imagine Mamdani fighting the same fight in some of the kind of,
In Virginia, yeah.
Exactly. But I'll tell you one thing about him, this thing about inspiring and motivating. At one point in the campaign, back in March, he had to put a freeze on donations because they'd already reached the legal limit for the time period they're on. So he was, and these were largely in, pretty small donations, just a sense of people want to be part of something different and part of the change that it feels that he represents. And your point, Rory, about the business community, I'll just tell our listeners and viewers, you were there, but you and I did an event for the Mooch, and one of his big he organises these big conferences for his crypto friends. And you and I spoke, and
let me set it up for you. So it was all going very well. Everyone was absolutely loving me and Alistair. And finally, I made my final comments, and Alistair was going to finish the whole thing. And traditionally, we finish with a rousing thing. It's an absolute round of applause.
And so there was a woman at the front who'd been sitting, eating out of our hands and loving and nodding and what have you. And then, so at the end, I said, okay, I'll tell you what gives me hope, and I hope that this doesn't upset you. What gives me hope? That a young guy, 34, with a beautiful smile, can come along and he can shake up American politics. He can frighten Donald Trump, and he can make rich people think, you know what, they should pay their taxes. And this woman suddenly went, oh my God!
And we left. We left to almost...
To thunderous applause. Thunderous applause.
Desultory, disappointed, confused.
No, they were fine. The mooch was happy. He said that we got them fired up. Anyway, I suspect you're right. We'll be talking about Trump a lot in the future, that's for sure. But I think we'll be talking about Mamdani.
My thing that I'm going to be interested in is whether he tries to play some of the games that he's played in Portland and elsewhere on crime and security. Because NYPD, the New York Police Department, is unlike any other police department in the United States. It is basically its own paramilitary organization. I was talking to someone in NYPD yesterday, and he was explaining that it's the only police force in the US which, when the Secret Service turns up, they ask NYPD before they arrive. Generally, the Secret Service turns up with the president. They just, if you're lucky, they tell you probably 10 minutes before he arrives. May not tell you at all. Just push you out of the way. NYPD, they coordinate unbelievably carefully. They're very, very deferential towards them. So it's going to be really interesting if Trump tries to pick a fight with NYPD.
Right, let's take a break and then come back and talk about...
Vandal, 5, Dragnet, 1, heads up, new, Bandit, Bullseye, 205, 30, 4000, sprint, MiG-29.
Former Al-Qaeda terrorist taking over.
Dragnet, 1, Vandal, 5,
there's a lot
copy.
here that actually strangely connects to Mamdani. Welcome back to The Restless Politics with me, Rory Stewart.
And me, Alistair Campbell. So let's go to Central Eastern Europe. I think they see it as Central Europe. We maybe look at it as a bit east. But there's a lot going on. Our leading interview this week is with Radek Sikorski, Deputy Prime Minister of Poland. Really interesting on Trump and Putin and Ukraine. But also you have a real sense of just how vulnerable they feel to Russia. And then we're going to talk about Czech Republic in particular, but also Slovakia and Hungary. And just to position them, if you look at a map of Europe, you've got Germany and Poland that sort of sit there almost like mirrors of each other. And then you come down a bit and you've got the Czech Republic there, Slovakia, and then Hungary. And of course, Hungary famously led by Viktor Orban, who was given a few concessions by Trump this week at another meeting after a meeting in the Oval Office, and Slovakia with Fico, the new leader. They're both leaning towards Russia, and that's why there's been a lot of interest in the fallout from the Czech Republic election and this billionaire businessman Andrej Babiš, who's won the election, but insufficiently to carry it on his own. He's had to make a coalition deal with some, I would argue, pretty unpleasant people. Two smaller parties. One of them has I don't know of any other party that calls itself this. They're called Motorists for Themselves.
And it's completely absurd. They're basically an anti-bicycle party.
Well, they're also anti-EU and anti-NATO.
Yeah, but it's part of our sort of broader story, isn't it, about how much politics is changing, how extraordinary kind of single issue parties. I mean, this new form of populism, this new form of campaigning is really, really interesting.
Yeah, that is true, but both they and the second party in the coalition, Freedom and Direct Democracy, or SPD, they both actually performed badly in the election, despite having these very anti-Europe, anti-NATO, and as you say, I've seen them as pro-car rather than anti-bicycle, but very anti-anything to do with the climate. So so the bad news for people like us is they're now part of the government. I guess the good news is they didn't do very well, and they are much, much weaker within the coalition. So whether they'll be that powerful, but the one thing I want to draw particular attention to, because I thought this was really quite alarming but interesting, the reaction to it. You mentioned this guy
Tomio Okamura.
Tomio Okamura, right? So he is second generation immigrant, but he's become the big leader of the campaign against immigrants.
He's half Japanese, got a
he's
Japanese
half Japanese.
dad.
Yeah, and he's also very, very opposed to Ukraine and to any support for Ukraine. He's been made the Speaker of the Assembly rather than a minister. The first thing he did on taking the job was to hold a ladder for somebody to climb up the ladder and take down the Ukrainian flag, which has been flying there since the invasion of Russia. Now, bad, okay? However, the response has been for lots of parliamentarians who share the building to be putting their own Ukrainian flags out of the windows. So, you know...
But these countries that you've mentioned, and as you said, they make a very interesting shape on a map, are called the Visegrad Four, so Poland, Hungary, Slovakia and Czechia. And as you say, broadly speaking, Hungary, full-on populist, Slovakia going in a populist direction, Czechia has gone to the right again. I mean, it's basically gone from Petr Fiala, who was a sort of, without being unfair, a little bit of a Keir Starmer character. He was somebody who was seen as being strong on foreign affairs.
I think he was David Gork. I think he was wet Tory. I think he was wet Tory. Rory Stewart type.
Criticised for being out of the country a little bit too much, but very strong on NATO, strong on confronting Russia, strong on drones. Managed a very difficult moment. I mean, his time in office, we talked about this, I think, a few weeks ago. They took in 380,000 Ukrainians. That's 3% of the population of Czechia.
It's now, I checked this, Rory. I spoke to some news outlets. It's now 500,000 in a population of 10.5 million.
So it would be like Britain taking in 3 million Ukrainians.
But it's gone well. It's gone well.
It's gone well. And many people think, particularly if you are from Prague and you're a liberal intellectual, you're totally astonished that this man who was very well spoken, very thoughtful, pursuing sensible policies, has been hooped out by Babiš. He and Tomio Okamura are both facing criminal charges. I mean, this is part of the sort of general... And under Czech law, if you get elected to the House of Representatives, this is something that's also true, of course, famously in Israel, you can avoid criminal prosecution, right? So he is somebody who's basically benefited from the privatizations after the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe. He's somebody who feeds off subsidies, and we're gambling a great deal that actually, in the end, what really matters to him is being the richest man in Czechia. And that trumps any kind of ideology for him, because he will lurch from far-right statements to far-left statements, but generally the assumption is that European Union subsidies are so beneficial for his businesses that he probably won't go in the other direction. Then we have Tomio Okamura. So Okamura was the host, briefly, of their equivalent of Dragon's Den, so it's a bit like running The Apprentice, right? It's a bit of this kind of Trumpian stuff. He's also somebody, and this is echoes of Germany, where the court found that it was perfectly legitimate to call him a fascist, who ran a campaign with pictures of Africans wielding knives, which is what the criminal charges are being put against him for. Somebody who's very pro-Israel, very pro-Russian. He's a great one for this Judeo-Christian stuff. Very radically anti-Islam. So it's a bit of a kind of Tommy Robinson Judeo-Christian anti-Islam going on there. And then if you get it to a broader picture, of course, as we found in our interview with Sikorski, the Polish picture is less straightforward because, of course, they didn't manage to win the presidency. So the story that there was a decisive victory for Tusk and the populists who'd run Poland since 2015 had been consigned to history isn't quite true. Poland remains very much almost 50-50 geographically split with this big kind of right-wing base.
Interestingly on that, of course, in Czech Republic, there's a sort of inverse of that, because the president, Pavel, he's he's seen as right, but he's sensible, mainstream, former general, big on NATO, very pro-Ukraine. So there's a sort of bit of a mirror thing going on there.
Yeah. But I think it's just, again and again, two themes. One is it's all to play for, and you're certainly not counting the populists out. The AfD is still well over 30%. Okamura is in a full formal alliance with the Rassemblement National in France. He's very much part of this whole ecosystem. And I think that's the first thing. And the second thing is the weirdness of this new politics, of these sort of characters who pop up, and how difficult it is to deal with them and in this weird new world, which is about people facing criminal charges, oligarchs, corruption, hosts of Dragon's Den.
Yeah, and most of Babish's money is pointing westward to sort of France, Germany, rest of Europe, rest of Western Europe, as opposed to east. So that's why I think it's not simple to say. He's definitely not in this sort of Orban Fico camp in terms of let's love Putin.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I hadn't realised this until I spoke to somebody this morning, that when the Salisbury attacks happened here, when Theresa May was Prime Minister,
Request instrument approach.
the Skripals and leading to the death of a British citizen, Babiš was Prime Minister, and he expelled quite a lot of Russian diplomats, aka spies.
Good morning, Banshee, 61, ADN approach, vectors to Bernard approach, runway 05.
Essentially, he's going to be
Fuel
continuing
page
to be
2997.
a billionaire business person.
Banshee,
whilst
61,
he's also
fly present
running
heading
the government
6000,
with this
maintain
rather
300 knots.
pairing in the
Yeah,
coalition.
and
Beast
basically he
2-1,
wants to be
Tushia,
rich,
F-16,
famous, and
30
powerful
miles,
if he returns to
south,
Michael Wolff's
19,000.
triad.
Request vectors for
And
visual
that sort of
mapping.
trumps his ideological
Banshee,
claims.
62,
Maybe
turn
this
right
is
heading
a good
285,
time then to transition to
6000,
the other
runway
big story,
05.
which is Syria. So
East 21,
we
ADN
interviewed
approach,
Ahmed al-Shara,
vectors for
and were
approach,
massively
runway
criticised
05.
by the MAGA crowd, and you can
Fuel
still
page
see on our social media feed whenever we say
2997.
anything. If I say something mild
East
about how
21, turn left heading
I'm very proud of my
320,
new
descend
book
to
on
4000,
Middle
runway
Cumbrian farms. There'll be a
05.
picture of you and me with al-Shara
East
saying,
22,
"How's
turn
your
left heading
terrorist friend?" And so-
320,
Anyway,
5000.
but of course, it's now not just us that are getting our picture with al-Shara. The CENTCOM commander, I know the commander of the American forces in the Middle
Playing
East, was
basketball.
That's right, with him and with our friend, our acquaintance, the foreign minister.
Yeah.
East
And al-Shara
21,
was playing.
orbit
Do
for
you think
station
those
4000.
pictures, I don't want to revisit Panorama Splicing.
East
Do you think those
22,
pictures
orbit
were
for
revealed?
station
All
5000.
three of them were absolutely brilliant.
Banshee 62, orbit for station
Chucking a ball into
6000.
who?
No, I think they are all really good at it. I think, well, I mean, to start with, al-Shara is very tall, and I think played basketball in his youth. No, I think this is genuine. Anyway, this has now led to the fact that al-Shara has just been in Washington. He's the first Syrian president, I think, to meet the U.S. president since the 1940s.
Yes, 1946, yeah.
1946. So he's had this meeting in which Trump has basically said, okay, we'll make sure the sanctions are off Syria again.
Not all of them.
Not all of them, and some of them he can't control because they're actually out of Congress.
Yep.
And the foreign minister is about to visit London, where he's going to be reopening the Syrian embassy in London. Business advice has been put out by the Foreign Office. He's going to be giving a speech in Chatham House. And if he's listening, anyone's listening, we would like to go back to Syria to interview the president again. So please, we're looking forward to a one-year update on what's going on, because the problem remains very, very complicated.
Yeah.
He still is dealing with a country where he's got to deal with his own former terrorist colleagues. He's fighting ISIS now increasingly with American troops. There's talks about him putting an American base in Syria, which will be totally offensive to his former al-Qaeda allies who feel they were fighting for Syria and Islam against foreign occupation. But the Americans have been very pleased with the way that he's been going against ISIS and against the Iranian IRGC. Israel is continuing to drive the narrative that he's an existential threat to the region. Laura Loomer,
Oh my God.
the American MAGA commentator, is very, very anti-al-Shara, so quite a lot of the abuse that we're getting is driven by MAGA
Approach, say again.
people who, interesting, Trump is sort of confronting.
Banshee
And
61,
maybe
fly
because Mohammed
heading
bin Salman, the Saudi
275, hold
de facto
6000,
ruler, is
maintain
turning up
300
in Washington
knots.
next week. Final point, Simon Collis, the former British ambassador to Damascus, points out there's something very interesting that Trump keeps referring to Erdogan, the Turkish leader. And for Erdogan, what matters is what happens to the Kurdish population in northeast Syria, who, because they became American and British allies in the fight against ISIS, were armed and given huge freedom and basically expanded right the way to the Euphrates, took a lot of Arab areas, pushing for autonomy, which is the last thing that Turkey wants, because there's a big Kurdish population in Turkey, very worried about that. And the signaling coming out of the White House is Turkey, al-Shara are going to push back against the idea of Kurdish autonomy. Over to you.
Interesting. I mean, as you know, I saw my old boss and our old former Prime Minister Tony Blair the other day, who's still involved in this sort of Gaza plan and trying to take it forward. But he was really interesting about the way that Trump operates, and this is actually quite a good example of it. This isn't what we were discussing, but I just thought of that as you were speaking then. He was making the point that, state of the obvious,
Banshee
Trump
61,
is deeply
turn left
unconventional.
heading
He said
265,
that in
hold
some cases, it's
6000.
almost like the guy's driving a bulldozer into a problem. And as he bulldozes the problem, all sorts of debris flies off. And then everybody else has to sort of try and make sense of how to put it back together or try to shape something new. So I think if you were thinking about al-Shara, who's relatively new into this and coming from, as we know, a very violent background, and with a $10 million bounty on his head until quite recently.
Yeah, exactly. Just to remind listeners, because he was the head of Al-Qaeda Syria, and before that was in Al-Qaeda Iraq,
Banshee 61, orbit for station 6000.
And then his successor.
Gamble 4,
broke away
airborne,
from ISIS.
Singleton,
But, $10
F-16,
million
1000.
because he was one of the most famous terrorists
Gamble
in the world.
4,
Exactly.
Aguiano,
And actually, because
departure,
so many of them
depart
have been
heading
taken out by the
175,
Americans,
resume on
he's one
navigation.
of the last ones standing of that leadership, and how Trump deals with that. So the point Tony was making, not in relation to this, we were talking about somebody else, but how I interpret that in relation to this, the bulldozer. If this had been right, this is happening in Syria. We're glad that Assad's out of the picture. Something new's happening here. This guy's come in, but he's basically a terrorist and he wants sanctions lifted. I think a pre-Trump American
Banshee
system.
61, fly heading 230, descend to 5000, maintain 240 knots.
Let's just see how it goes. Let's plan it. And there they are. I'm just looking at a picture now of Trump behind his desk with al-Shara next to him. And Trump's quote about al-Shara, and there is something a little bit homoerotic about the way that he talks about him, I have to say. But he said, this guy's had a rough past, but we've all had a rough past. I mean, so he's sort of always put himself on a par. Like, we've all had these, and here we are, we're now leaders.
And it's a tough country. And
It's a tough
look,
country, yeah.
to give Trump some credit here, to really go well out on the limb, it's actually all the odds have been against al-Shara being able to survive. The economy is smashed to pieces. The country is divided. The Druze have been up in arms. The Alawites have been up in arms. His own Damascus troops he's lost control of. There have been atrocities. The Kurds are basically having nothing of it. So if you were explaining why the whole thing would fail, it seems almost inevitable. It seems like an impossible job, particularly with the background he's got. The only real thing that's
Banshee
keeping him going
62,
is firstly
turn
his
right
own
heading
skill.
115, descend to 5000, maintain 230 knots.
So far, 11 months in. I mean, again, if it went wrong in 4 or 5 years' time, nobody would be surprised. But my goodness, he's defied the odds so far. But secondly, the only way it could possibly work is the US giving this incredibly rapid, confident support.
Yeah.
And as you say, Israel was completely against it, and it seemed as though Rubio's team was completely against getting behind him. UAE was very much skeptical of him. So Trump has possibly, with al-Shara, the most unlikely combination of two people, have given Syria probably its best chance that we've seen for years. Doesn't mean it'll work, but its best chance it's had for years.
The point I was making, it is the sort of bulldozer approach, isn't it? The sanction, just to think that when we interviewed al-Shara, if you remember, and he was very tired, he'd just been off on a trip and it was a really long day and we did it late and I was very, very tired, but it was obvious to me that what he was trying to do was to shape for a Western audience his sense of, I'm not who I was, I am now you can see me as a conventional leader, and I've got a really struggling country, and unless we get sanctions
Banshee
lifted,
61, turn right heading 240, hold 5,000, maintain 350 knots.
We both said afterwards, that's going to be
East 21, turn right heading 105, hold 4,000, maintain 220 knots.
I don't want to overdo this, but boys, was that a clause form?
Yeah.
You know, he's got his brothers in arms that he's been fighting with for a decade or more are very, very skeptical of the United States, of Israel, and all this kind of stuff. We interviewed him. We got quite quickly to Syria after he'd taken Damascus. That was his first foreign trip. And
East
since then,
22, turn right heading 025, descend to 4,000, maintain 230 knots, runway
But he's also
05.
created quite an interesting government. So, for example, people talk a lot about it, but the Minister of Culture is a really astonishing person. So this is Hind Kabawat. She is a Syrian Christian. She worked for many organizations. She has done negotiating courses
Banshee
at Harvard.
61, turn
She
left
was in
heading
Canada for many years.
120,
She worked
hold
for the US
5,000,
Institute for Peace.
maintain
She
350
was part
knots,
of the
runway
Syrian
05.
Democratic Opposition.
Approach,
She's
saying
very
yes.
agreed to
4
join this
airborne,
government,
2
and
ship,
she's leading the
F-16,
cultural activities.
2,000.
She's reaching out to the Christian community.
Banshee 61,
That's
fly
really
heading
strong.
110, hold
Symbolically,
5,000,
that's a really
maintain
interesting
350 knots.
No, he's on
Plasma
the move,
4,
there's no doubt about it. The final
Egiano,
point is
departure,
it's really
fly
interesting.
heading
We
110,
see so
resume
many
on
of these
navigation.
Trump meetings in the White House. I'd love to, if there's anybody in the White House protocol team who can explain, he has different
Banshee 62, fly heading 230, 4,000, vectors to right base.
With al-Shara, the picture, the main picture they had was of Trump behind the desk with al-Shara standing next to him. And much of the meeting itself took place with Trump behind his desk and al-Shara sitting in front of the desk next to J.D. Vance. Okay? When he had Keir Starmer in there, and when he had Mark Carney, when he had Zelensky, it was the
Banshee
more
61, turn left heading 035, descend to 2,000, maintain 300 knots,
That's where we
vectors
always
to
used to have
final.
meetings with Clinton and Bush. But then with Orban and with Albanese, they were in the cabinet room with the press coming in behind the visitors, and then
East
Orban right
21,
next to
fly
them.
heading
So it was really
335,
interesting about Orban.
3,000,
He did something
maintain
which I've not seen
250
any other
knots.
leaders do. And this shows a sign of how confident he is in that relationship with Trump. When Trump spoke, and as you know, Trump can go off in any which way direction. And quite often he spoke about
Banshee
Orban's
62,
position.
fly crescent
And on
heading,
2 or 3
descend to
occasions, Orban
3,000,
lifted his hand
maintain
up
240
Trump's
knots.
arm and then said to the question, just pointed, can I just clarify one point there? And it was really interesting. And Trump just sort of shut up and nodded. So it was a very kind of interesting body language dynamic.
Well, listen, just to try to pull this all together. So we've done Zoran Mamdani, we've done Czechia, and we've done Syria. And the way I try to put it all
East
together
21,
is
fly
it's
heading
a story
050,
of how
hold
politics
3,000,
today is
vectors to
very,
final,
very difficult
runway
to recognize,
05.
that it's about
East
Mamdani, who
22,
is a figure
fly
that's
crescent heading,
completely
descend
broken free
to
of the
3,000,
Democratic
maintain
establishment and
250
come nowhere
knots.
and broken every record in terms of
Banshee
ethnicity,
62,
age,
fly
and
heading
everything to take over
325,
the world. A story
2,000,
in
maintain
Czechia, which
200
is a
knots,
familiar
vectors
story
to final,
in the
runway
new Trump
05.
world of a billionaire out to make money facing criminal charges with a man who is a kind of apprentice judge. And then in Syria, a world in which somebody who had a $10 million American bounty on his head
Approach,
is
say
now
again.
becoming
61,
one of the
turn right
central
to final
allies
approach
of
course,
the United States in the
045,
region,
slow to
with
approach
America
speed.
moving very, very
Banshee
fast.
61, turn right to final approach course, 045, check approach speed.
Playing basketball with somebody that they
Banshee
were trying to cut
61,
only a few
contact
months
tower,
ago.
done.
Let's close with what I think is quote of the week.
Request
from
landing.
Robert Sikorsky. we the Poles will eat grass rather than become a Russian colony again.
Banshee 61, Auto
That's very
Tower.
good.
Continuing
That's very
bound
good.
for
You used
runway
that, right?
05.
You said we will eat grass rather than put up with Boris Johnson coming back.
I might use it in another day, but I'll wait until people have forgot that it was Radek Zikorsky. Right, see you later. Q&A tomorrow.
And Alistair, in question time, maybe we can develop some of the ideas that we had today. I'm quite keen to get into Tanzania, which is an amazing story about what's happening to politics and democracy in Africa. An extraordinary case study of how all the optimism around liberal democracy is beginning to go in very, very strange directions as new
ready for
forms of
departure.
politics emerge. And then I think
Viper
you also
5,
have
Old
some
Jordan.
things that you really want to get onto.
Well, I thought I should maybe offer a few reflections on
Banshee
Dick
61,
Cheney,
Auto
former
Tower.
Vice
Wing
President, who
010 at
passed away
16 knots.
We should
Runway
talk about,
05, clear for
Peter
landing. Check gear
Sheinbaum
down.
in Mexico, who
Banshee
I haven't
62
really
on
seen
final.
much of this in the British media, but she's
Banshee
in big
62,
news there
Auto
because
Tower. Continuing
the man
bound
who
for
broke
runway
her,
05.
which happens to a lot of Mexican women, and she's deciding she's taking legal action against this guy. And as I said earlier, we're going to talk a little bit about Peter Hyman's teenagers reporting.
Very good.
See you then.
See you then.
Scalable.
Every home that they power brings that future close to the present, whether it's panels catching light or turbines turning across the country. And this is
So
progress
heavy.
which isn't measured just in targets and slogans, but in sunlight, in wind, in electricity, and a
Beast
bit of
2-1,
British
on final.
persistence.
And progress is not always about shouting the loudest. It's about keeping the
Beast
lights on
21,
intelligently
Auto Tower.
and making
Continuing
clean
bound
energy
for
something
runway
that
05.
everyone can afford.
The energy transition isn't tomorrow's problem, it's today, and Fuse Energy is actually doing something to address it.
So switch to Fuse Energy today using the code POLITICS to save on your energy bills and help power a
Banshee
cleaner and
62,
sustainable
Auto
future.
Tower. Wing 010 at 16 knots. Runway 05, clear for landing. Check gear down.
Welcome to the Rest is Politics question time with me, Rory Stewart.
And me, Alistair Campbell.
And we're recording this on the 12th of November, just after news has broken of a challenge to Keir Starmer within the Labour Party. And we're going to begin with that, obviously. And we're recording slightly later. But we're also doing
Beast
some other very
22, on
interesting
final.
things in this question time. We're looking at issues such as
Beast
votes for 16
22,
and 17 year
Auto
olds.
Tower. Continuing bound for runway 05.
We're looking at what's happening in
Banshee
Mexico.
61,
And we're looking
contact
at some
ground.
of the
Switch
big
to 3,
questions
7,
around
6, 6,
African
5.
democracy following the elections in Tanzania, with a following reflection right at the very end on Dick
Request
Cheney.
taxi
But
back
let's
to the ramp.
begin with what's happening
Satan
with
2, ship
Labour.
F-16s. Request taxi.
Can I start, Alistair, with the thing that
Good morning,
puzzles
Satan
me?
2. You are
I
number
look
2
at
for
my
departure.
newspapers, I
Taxi,
open it,
Zulu,
and there's a
then
very
hold, short,
straightforward
runway
story
05.
going on, which
Banshee
is
61, taxi back
there
to
is
the
now a
ramp. Bravo.
challenge
Zulu
to Keir Starmer's
0,
leadership,
0.
and the Labour Party is expecting that shortly after the budget, Wes Streeting or some other senior Labour figure, the Health Secretary, is going to make a move to topple Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. And I take it at face value, but I immediately pick up somewhere under the surface that people like you who understand how Number 10 works and journalists know there's something else going on, that this isn't just a straightforward story that some journalists uncovered, that somebody's pushing something. Anyway, over to you.
Well, so you and I last night were at Hammersmith Apollo talking about all sorts of things with 2,500 people. And we were asking them all sorts of difficult questions.
Satan 2,
Not
taxi.
some straightforward questions, but
Two,
the
zero,
one that really
Banshee
sort of
62,
hit
request
home to
taxi
me.
back.
We asked them if at the next election Keir Starmer is leading the Labour Party and
Banshee
Nigel
62.
Farage is
Banshee
leading the
62,
Reform
taxi
Party.
back to the
One
ramp.
magnet.
Welcome back.
Which of those two do you think is going to be
Four
Prime Minister
radar.
after that election?
Fuel
And
safe,
I was
2,
expecting
3.
something around, because it was a pretty progressive, London-y, probably quite Labour-y audience. I was expecting something around about 80-20. It came up at 55-45, Starmer, Farage. As you keep saying, Keir Starmer has the lowest ratings of any Prime Minister, with the possible exception for a few days of Liz Truss, that we've ever had and ever known. So into this febrile mix, deliberately
East 2-1, request taxi back.
this story that if the budget goes tits up and the public don't like it, West Streeting is manoeuvring to
Beast
to
2-1,
make
taxi
a
back to the
challenge.
ramp. Welcome back.
When you say, I know how this works, you have to stand back a little bit and think, okay, what's going on here? The first thing I do is I look at some of the bylines. So the byline in The Guardian was Pippa Crerar. Now, a lot of political journalists, and including on the broadcasts and the broadsheets and the tabloids, they're only really interested in trivia, they're interested in personality spats, they're interested in all the ups and downs. Pippa Crerar tends not to be like that. So I thought, this is not just some lunch that she's sort of, teased out a few sexy quotes. Somebody has made this decision. And then it spills out onto the BBC and they say, number 10, allies of the Prime Minister.
East 22, request taxi
now,
back.
my point is that number 10, the Prime Minister, most important job in the country,
East 22, taxi back to the ramp. You're cleared all the way in.
a day, including in their sleep, they should understand their words are his words. You cannot, and sometimes I went over the top and sometimes I would say things in a way that Tony Blair wouldn't afterwards have liked or whatever. But what I never did was push an agenda of my own. So Keir Starmer has stood up in the House of Commons today and said, I have never authorised briefings against colleagues and it is unacceptable. Okay.
Can I just pause a second, because I'm already getting confused, and I think the audience will too. So, is the story actually that rather than what we expect, which is that somebody's picked up from, I don't know, Wes Streeting's camp, that he's about to lead a rebellion against Keir Starmer, which would have been the story with, Theresa May, some ambitious person like Boris Johnson on manoeuvres, leaks, I'm going to move against. It's actually the other way round.
That would be a very different story.
Okay, just to be really simple, the story here seems to be that number 10, for some reason best known only to itself, has let it be known off the record to journalists that they think there's going to be a challenge to Keir Starmer.
More importantly, what they were trying to communicate is if and when there is a challenge to Keir Starmer, he is not going to walk away, he is going to see us off, he is going to fight.
For Bears of Small Brain, I agree that you totally disagree with this strategy, but what in the best case scenario did they think they were doing? Because it doesn't make any sense to me at all. What were they hoping to achieve?
It doesn't make any sense to me either. I guess the only thing you could say might be, well, Wes Streeting is up to something, and we're going to smoke him out, so we have to get him on the radio and the television, as he was this morning, to say this is completely ridiculous. The trouble is, it's a bit like the thing with the BBC. It's a game that's just gone too far. And to have, look, I was regularly raised at Prime Minister's questions. It is never good for a Prime Minister when the people that work for them, the officials, are being bandied about in the House of Commons. So when Kemi Badenoch today said to Keir Starmer, do you have faith in Morgan McSweeney? That is not a good place for the Prime Minister to be. And it's not a good place for Morgan McSweeney to be. And, I think what's happened
Be
is
advised, hostile launch activity detected. Bullseye. 16374.
He doesn't get politics, and he's sort of subcontracted it all out to these sort of young guys who run around the place, and they're the ones who are doing all the sort of dark art stuff. But I go back to my central point. Downing Street is not a playground. Downing Street is the centre of our government. And the worst thing, you and I were at an event this morning, Rory, and if you remember the very first question that we received from a member of the public, she said, I turned on the radio this morning and I was in despair. I want this government to do well. I want it to succeed. There is so much in the country that we need to fix. And this sounds like the Tories.
So to quote my mother, who's always to be quoted in these situations, so very long-term, strong Tory supporter, she's completely shocked. She said to me this morning, darling, we cannot keep getting rid of prime ministers like this. This is ridiculous. We've been through whatever it is, 5 of them in the last few years, and it's mad.
Banshee, 1, 2 ship, F-16, request taxi.
Good morning, Banshee 1, you are number 2 for departure. Hold present position.
Prior to that,
Give way to Satan 2, F-16, taxiing Zulu.
The media's so used to the change, and let's have another battle, let's have another challenge, let's have this sort of trivia to talk about. But the point is, if you're the government, you don't feed it. Don't feed that agenda. I'm sorry if I'm not explaining this very well, but I'm very angry.
You're doing your best, but as I understand it, somebody like Morgan McSweeney, or somebody pretty powerful in the number 10 machine.
Pippa Crerar wouldn't take it from, the cleaners or the messengers. It's got to be somebody with real authority.
Somebody with real authority in the number 10 machine decided to tell the journalists that somebody